BlackInTechBerlin. Then we will get into the conversation of why we're here this evening. But for everyone who's new, if you haven't heard about us or you've just seen us somewhere on social media, we're BlackInTechBerlin. And our community was started in 2019. The reason why we started, we basically wanted to find each other, see who's where, what are they working on, and how we can connect to each other. And primarily, I was in this search because there is a perception that there isn't enough Black talent in Germany and Berlin. And in my profession as a recruiter and as a talent acquisition manager, to be honest, I had only hired one Black person for one Black talent at that time. So it was really hard for me to live with that reality, knowing that I actually do know a lot of Black talent as well in Berlin. So we decided to create the community. And within a couple of months, of course, you know, people showed up. And that was for us the realization that if you really are seeking for something, say it, call it out, and see who shows up for it. Since 2019, we are now about 1,000 and about members on meetup.com. If you're on meetup.com, you can join already this space. We also have another space on Circle, and that's more where people talk to one another. You can ask for something, people will respond with the comments as well. And on Circle, we're about 300 members now that are there actively. And it's really just such a lot of progress that we've made as a community and as a people in Berlin. And our goal for the next coming years is first to continue building community, and that we do through organizing events such as this. And some of you have been to some of our events that we've organized earlier, like watching Black Panther together, watching the Woman King together. Before that, we have other serious topics, but we realized we need to relax a little and just get to know one another, in informal settings as well. So we want to strengthen this idea as well next year. So if you join us on meetup.com, you will hear about all our next events. The other thing we really want to focus on next year is growing people in terms of skills and knowledge. The pipeline still is short when it comes to Black talent. And we realize that different people come to Berlin and Germany with different sets of skills. Most of the people don't primarily come to enter the tech space in Berlin or Germany, but we're already in the position as a community to guide a lot of our members into a direction that can actually put them into the industry that needs their skills. So our Grow Academy will be live and functioning next year. If you want to volunteer as a mentor, or if you are a mentee, you can just keep in touch with us in that end. We also in mind something very fun for the little ones. As you know, with technology, it really starts way, way, way back. How much influence we put our children to, we show them what are the exposures that we're giving them that can actually just light that bulb up. And with technology, some of the companies are now removing computer science as a requirement to enter tech. But before then, you really needed to have mathematics, science, chemistry and whatever to get into science. Well, we can also influence the next generation into a direction that will not only require that, but actually prepares them even better. And if you're familiar with the education system in Germany, a lot of kids with migration backgrounds don't actually make it into the science branch of studies. So we want to take this proactively by, teaching our kids from a very young age. Kids are very innovative, they are intelligent, you can give them a Lego, they'll come up with I don't know what, And we're technologists and scientists as well, and we can see that children learn by showing them by example. So we can play this role really effectively as parents. I'm sleeping because I'm a parent. But if you're not excited yet, you just think about the next generation and how we're actually going to close this gap. If we're not proactive, in really influencing the direction of education our children take, we are never going to close the gap of representation in tech. So we hope we're going to have some fun stuff for the young ones next year. One of the other elements that's being brought to us as the leadership of BlackInTechBerlin is how inclusive and how diverse we are as a community, and why we started, why we don't include others. And because of that, we actually created a space called Talent Diverse that can actually allow companies to hire women and BIPOC talent, and also just connect to them. And we realized that there is a need for safe space for Black talent or Black professionals, but there's also a space that we can create for BIPOC women and anybody who's really interested in finding career opportunities with companies that lack diversity. So we have a job board that is separate from the community, where people who are looking for opportunities can go and access opportunities that they need. And we're always working towards becoming also inclusive and diverse, because that's what we're preaching at the end of the day, so we have to become it. And we feel like this is one of the ways that we can do that. And of course, we are also in this room, and we can see it's not just like Black talent that is here, or Black people that are here. There are also other people that are represented here, and we love to see this. And it might seem as a small thing, like actually takes a lot of courage for people to attend a Black in Tech meetup, because there is an assumption that it's not for everyone, and we always want to highlight that actually it is. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to be talking to each other. We want other people to also hear our experiences, so they can actually take it out there and change, the systems that we're fighting. So if you're here, you're visiting us, you're hosting us, thank you so much for hosting us. And yeah, we're grateful to Tia as well for hosting us. Eva, I don't know if you want to say a little bit about Tia.
Sure.
That would be nice.
Thank you, Fabi. Hi, everyone. Welcome to TIER, and thanks for being here on a Friday night. So if you don't know TIER, we are a micro-mobility provider, mainly based here in Europe, but we also operate in the markets of the Middle East and North America. We are a multimodal micro-mobility provider. What that means, we do scooters and we do electric bikes as well, and up until recently, we also had mopeds, which are sadly no longer available in Berlin. Yeah, and hopefully you get to ride a TIER sometime soon, and if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you. Thank you, Eva. All right, so you know what I'm gonna do? How many of you follow us on LinkedIn already? So everybody that doesn't follow us on LinkedIn, can you follow us now? Can you also follow us on Instagram? I'm gonna count the hands. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. And then for Circle, we can actually send you a special invitation to join the community. That one you can't just join if you go to the website, but we need to invite you. And then we have an active Slack, not Slack, WhatsApp group that Mark has created, by the way. So let me know what works for you best. But we have all the channels if you want to stay in touch. Amazing! Yay, let's get started! So thank you for being here once more. I think I'll just go back to the first slide so we have the amazing logo of BlackInTech behind us. And then we can start. And before our speakers have the stage to introduce themselves, we thought of having a great significant conversation about building a sustainable European tech industry. I feel personally that in Europe we're building a completely different ecosystem that needs to have its own conversation, because we're evolving completely differently to compare maybe to the ecosystem in the UK or in the US. And oftentimes we talk about tech in general, but we all are evolving in different directions, and all need different kinds of processes in order to become successful, sustainable, and a great hub in itself. And so in this conversation tonight, we're talking about sustainability of the technology ecosystem in Europe, especially with the current economic situation that we're facing. How do we build sustainable businesses? But most importantly, how do we ourselves as professionals prepare for what's coming next year, or whatever it is that's coming that we don't know about? And on this panel, we have speakers who have an absolute amount of experience. They've been in tech, they're executives in their own roles, and they have great influence in Berlin, in Europe, and in other nations as well. And we'll be really delighted to hear what you have to share with us. What is it that we need to up, our game, so that we don't fail as bad as as we could. So yes, you will have the chance to introduce yourselves, but I will say your names, and then you can take it from there. So next to me here we have Agnes, and she is a regional program manager at Takeaways, and you've been in Berlin for about 15 years now. You're also a people leader, people manager, and also a coach. And you're going to say more to that. And next to Agnes, we have Shola. Shola works with Process and Naspers Group. They basically own most of the startups in Berlin and also across Europe. And Shola is the VP of People in the office of the CIO. And you have an enormous amount of experience. And honestly, I want to hear what you've seen, what you can predict, and how best can you prepare, because we are just probably like on the way to where you've been. So I believe your experience will be, your knowledge will be greatly appreciated. Last but not least, we have Tieto. And she is just been named, or she's just got into an amazing position as Chief Product Officer. Wow. Hi. I mean, this is incredible. How many Black women do you know that are Chief Product Officers in Berlin? I mean,
I think there are two of us.
See? Two, and I know you do incredible work in Berlin, in Germany, but you've also worked so hard to get where you are, and you have a lot to share with us. So if you can all add to what I've said, it will be amazing.
Yeah, so first of all, it's very nice to be here. It's not on. Yeah, okay, that's where we start. Grandma can't even turn this on.
Can you hear me now? So first of all, obviously it's really great to be here, to meet everyone. I will add, it still feels a little bit, it's definitely imposter syndrome. So when people say Chief Product Officer, I'm always like, oh yes, it's me. So it's, I'm still in the process of owning it and being very, very comfortable with it. But like Kaveh says, and all my friends and family remind me, is that, I have worked very, very hard. So it's not like someone came and just said, okay, here you go, darling. So yeah, and I think for me, I also feel the weight that I have to do well, because there aren't that many of us. So I think, yeah, I just started maybe like 2-3 months, but I can still feel that, the strain where you're like, oh, I have to make sure that I don't mess this up. So I'm still in the process of trying to give myself grace, but yeah, I work in product development, so product management, but I started off as a business analyst, so a little bit more technical, and I'm from the most beautiful country in Southern Africa, Zimbabwe. So yeah, and I've lived in Berlin for about 5.5 years, and before that I lived in the UK for 15. So yeah.
Amazing.
You want me to just introduce myself again?
Yes.
Okay.
And just add a bit to what I've said.
So yeah, Shola Shnoiki, been in Berlin for 4 years. I've worked, I don't literally all over the world, but I have worked in different countries around the world. So that's been interesting in my role. I've worked in the US, I've worked in the Nordics, I've worked in Dubai, and many different places. And I think one thing I do love about working in the work I do is just meeting people. You know, people are the most valuable assets we say, but actually it's very true. And I was going to say this later, but I'll say it now. But ChatGPT, who's heard of that? Yeah? Okay. All right. Some people haven't. Yeah, so, but it still boils down to that no matter what ChatGPT pulls out, we still need a human being to check it.
Yeah.
So humans, you still have a long way and a lot to add, a lot of value to bring. So yeah, I'm a champion of humans. I read a great book this year about humanizing AI and how important it is that even with the midst of diversity in technology, AI, and machine learning, you still need humans to be behind it, to push the envelope really. And kind of trying to answer your question, but also introduce myself here. But the biggest thing for me is the fact that we have to understand the value that we bring. So how do you build a sustainable ecosystem? Is by focusing on value. So as long as you're bringing value, you will always have a seat at the table.
Thanks, Shola. Very intimidating to introduce myself after these big names, but it's an absolute pleasure to sit here with you. Agnes, no, I'm not intimidated. It's just the natural thing to say, you know? It's like when someone says, how are you? You say, fine, and then you explain the rest later. But I see it as a privilege, and I really celebrate you, and I think we can't celebrate Power Women enough. I want to celebrate you, I want to celebrate Kaveh. I think we have a lot of work to do, and we're getting there, and it's nice to hold hands and walk to the finish line together. Agnes, I work with Just Eat Takeaway, been in Berlin for 15 years now. My career in the tech industry started out as a technical project manager, and it's been a very lonely place. Had a conversation with Kaveh about that. Obviously, I never thought that I was Black until I came to Europe, and then I realized, okay, I'm Black, and then I also realized that I'm female and Black at the same time. But I think in addition to what Shola just shared, it's very important not to get distracted, to keep your eyes on what you know you're made of, the value that you can bring. And that's the force that has kind of like driven me to where I am now. So started out as an individual contributor, and now I get the privilege to lead a team of technical project managers that are based across Europe. We're responsible for driving our products. We also work with releasing products that land in your hands. I'm 100% sure that all of you have, in one form or shape, worked or ordered food on a product that my team helped to bring to the market. So if you see brands like Livrando, or you are in Poland and you order with Pysznie, or you're in Australia and you order with Menulog, we are behind that. And it's a pleasure to do that, and just to know that if you decide in your mind that nobody will stop you, nobody will stop you. Maybe with that, I pause there, and yeah. It's passion right now, so I hope the intro still landed well.
Thank you. It does. And to kick off our discussion tonight, I've had this feeling that the current tech ecosystem is crumbling. That businesses that we thought were sustainable or were great business models are failing dismally. And either they're failing because of the current economic system, or they're failing because of the leadership that they have, or the structures that they're putting in place. And I am of the feeling that we need the next level of innovation, or our ecosystem needs to move up to the second stage of its growth. And I want to hear your perspective first on how things are going. What do you think? You can also borrow my microphone.
Okay, thank you. So I will respond from the perspective of when I look at each one of you in this room, I see individuals first and foremost before I see companies. So the privilege that you have is that as an individual, you can always decide which company am I going to associate myself with. Research the company, figure out where is it going, what's its strategy, what are its values, what is it really bringing to the market, and does that resonate with me as a human being, and the values that I stand for, and the goals that I have for myself. So to answer the question, I think you have more power as an individual to decide which country am I going to work in, for which company am I going to work for, where are they headed, and does that align with where I want to be headed. So you're never powerless, and even if thousands of business crumble, you have a choice because you can plug in and out to serve where you want to go. So I think while businesses and the leadership of various businesses will make mistakes or have blind spots, that doesn't in any form or shape disempower you as a human being. You can decide to improve your skills, you can decide to stay curious, you can decide to learn, you can decide to travel, you can decide to change careers, change industries, and that's really absolutely and also up to you. So regardless of what happens in the tech industry, regardless of what you see on the stock market, you make the decision about how you are going to succeed. And that's something nobody can take away from you, no industry can take away from you. That would be my response.
That's a great response, and I think if I'm not wrong, it means that what's happening now has happened or will happen again in the next couple of years. We just don't know, but we do have the power to kind of like respond with, how do you say, not with power, but with confidence that, I know where I'm going.
Yeah, and resilience, right? Yeah, resilience. Like, you have to be as agile and as flexible as you expect the companies to be. And you have to decide for yourself to be visionary about your own life. Like, I cannot expect from Just Eat Takeaway that just because I'm working for them right now, that they should make all the right decisions to make my life comfortable. No, I'm in when I'm in, and I'll be out when I'm out, right? But that when I'm in, I will bring my best, and I'll bring the value, and I will succeed, and when I'm out, I will still succeed, right? That's really
good. I think you need some level of maturity to start thinking, at this level that you're thinking, which a lot of people are not there yet,
I think that's the privilege that Black people in white spaces have, if I may put it that way, because you, first of all, like I said in my intro, you're lonely. Your experience is different from the experiences of some of the people around you. Also, depending on your level of ambition, your experience is also different from your fellow Black people, your Black community. So that's why, in the end, it's really going to be up to you. It's going to be, if I may recommend a book, because we've been talking about books and he already dropped a title for you if you're really making notes, mental notes. You get to design your life. There's a beautiful book, design book, that you can use for your career, for your life. It's called Design Your Life. I now forget the names of the authors, but you can really sit down and give thought to your life, taking into perspective what's happening in the world, the industries that you're interested in, the companies that you're interested in, the nations that speak to you from a value and value add perspective, because it's sometimes more beneficial to work in one country than it is in another. Are you taking the time to think about these things? That's the question, right? And when you take the time, are you really, really thinking about, what you can do, what value you can bring, what skills you need to get, pushing yourself to get those coaches, the mentors, read the books, and do the work. And then the rest really kind of works itself out. So I cannot respond from a business perspective, but I can really remind you of how powerful you are as an individual.
That's amazing.
It's really amazing. And you almost could stay there and just stick with the individual. No, just stick with the individual, because I think there is something very powerful about being empowered, and I think the world we live in does somehow disempower us. And I think some of the way we've lived our life right now in technology spaces means that there's not a lot of innovation in real terms, like real innovation. There's not a lot of it. And that's because we're losing that individual dream power. But let me talk about the macroeconomics and the business land. In the business land, what's happening right now is that, I won't say the bubble has burst. I'm just saying that technology companies are being asked to grow up. And there's money available, but there's money available that leads to profitability. So that the big change that we're seeing in the tech industry is where investors, venture capitalists are saying, okay, be profitable. Like, when are you going to get to profitability? Well, we've had the game of me throwing money at you, and as an angel investor myself, when I'm sitting down and talking to people who have startups, I'm saying to them, okay, so when are you going to hit profitability? And I realize you don't want to hit profitability, you just want more money, and you're looking for an exit, right? And actually what the tech industry is saying right now is, come on, let's get profitable, right? Let's build businesses that are profitable and are going to add value. And that's very hard to do, because the world we've lived in is a world of, hey, let's spend venture capitalist money, and we got a lot of money because, you know, this person gave us $5 million. And I work in the investment space, so I know how much money is being doled out. But the question now is, investors, stockholders, stock people are saying, when are you going to be profitable? And that's where the challenge is. And I think we were just talking in the break earlier that, you know, if you haven't read the news, Gorilla has been bought by Getry, and Getry's going to have a partnership with Takeaway, and, you know, there's a lot of amalgamation happening right now, but it doesn't remove the fact that innovation can still happen. New organizations will come up. Yesterday I met a lady from Spoke AI, it's a new company in Berlin. They're doing some amazing stuff, very innovative, using AI and, you know, tapping into your Slack channel and kind of giving you information back. So innovation will continue, but the only question now is, where's the road to your profitability? Where's the road for you to grow up? And actually, some of that didn't happen by accident. Some of it happened by the fact that we had COVID, right? We've had Ukraine war. Those two things in themselves would have caused a challenge. But then you add in the fact that macroeconomics-wise, there's just less money. So the cost of living has gone up. So therefore, money now carries weight. When in an economy where money carries weight, which happened in the 80s, happened in the 90s, so it's not new, it's just that we have to grow up and be more focused on business rather than fun. And let me just throw one thing out here, because a lot of people hear the news and they kind of get, oh, Facebook is letting go of kind of 10,000 people. In recruitment alone, they're letting go of 1,000 people. But do you know that Facebook has 3,000 recruiters? They have 600 people that crunch data about recruitment. 600. I mean, think about it. In Berlin, that's a whole company. They have 600 people that all they do is analyze the data about recruitment. So when Facebook says they're getting rid of 1,000 recruiters, they still have 2,000 recruiters left. And actually, they're still hiring. They've not stopped hiring, they're just changing the seats. So I think sometimes you need a filter also when you hear news. Amazon is letting go of 20,000 people, but how many people did Amazon actually hire? Amazon has, I think, I could be wrong, somebody will correct me, they Google it, I think it's 1.2 million people work for Amazon. Behind Walmart, they're the largest employer of people. Walmart has about 1.5 million people. So when you hear a number, kind of distill what you're hearing and understand the business behind the number, so you understand what's really happening in your ecosystem. Yes, 2023 is going to be a difficult year because there's going to be a recession in products. People are still going to buy products. It's not going to stop. So to your point, identify, align with organizations that you can see a future with. Now, I know that sounds almost impossible if you think about it, because you think, oh, the market is a bit difficult, and talent is scarce, and but actually, if you take ownership, you can direct your path. And in my own career, I've taken ownership a few times, where I've resigned from an organization because I got to a dead end. And actually stepping out and going into the cold opened up doors that I was surprised were going to be open. And I'll just give you a small story and I'll pass to you. The story is this, I stepped out of the job, and because I did a job a year ago, the lady I did the job with called me. Hey Shola, what are you doing? I need your company to come in and do this. Oh, I've left my company. Okay, we'll just hire you then. Right? And that's the power of networks. That's the power of, people are looking for doors to open, but actually you build the doors to open. You have to build them. And the way you build them is by networking, by connecting, by building bridges, by adding value, by delivering value. The lady called me because she said, what you did for us at HSBC, we have the same problem in Deliveroo. Would you come over and help us? I went in there as a contractor. After 2 weeks, the CEO, Will, said, you're not going anywhere. We're hiring you permanently. And that was it. That's how I got a permanent job. So I was going into the unknown, and it turned into a permanent job. So I'm just saying that we all have the opportunity, even tonight, as an example. We don't know. 5 years from now, where would you be? Where would I be? We met on the 20th floor in the WeWork building, but who knows, right? So.
Thank you for that, Shola. That was great. Thank you.
So I'll respond from sort of two sides, from the product perspective and the human perspective. So if I think about what's going on in the market, I definitely see that in the product world, we've lost the discipline of actually having sustainable and efficient products, because what's being sort of celebrated more is just like churning product after product out, feature after feature, more and more customers. And the other side of that is that if you think about support teams like customer service teams, they are growing at a really, really fast rate, because the products that we've been producing are not efficient. Because we are focusing so much on the competition, what's another player in this space doing, and we need to do the same thing. And I think when you do that, you really lose substance. So we've not really been building for sustainability, but we've mostly been building, I think it's actually from vanity. It's a lot of vanity metrics, because if you look deep down into the actual operational side of things, a lot of companies, things have not been well. And I think even from a consumer perspective, there've just been some products and services, I don't want to name names, where you kind of think to yourself, who is signing that check for you to get 1.2 billion in funding for something that just doesn't seem to be sustainable? It doesn't really make sense from a long-term perspective. So I think that even if I look at the sort of VC, and maybe you can correct me, but on the VC investor side, I think one of the biggest things that they lack is actually operational people. So people who have a lot of experience of actually developing these products and services. Because I joined a startup in 2020, so I come from corporate, and all the time, they obviously have a lot of hectic processes around how you develop products, but there was also a lot of emphasis on efficiency, on when you put a product out, make sure that the people who are supporting our customers have automations in place, because we don't want our customer teams to grow at that rate, because that just eats, you can be making more money, but your costs are ballooning at the same time. And it's a lot to do with when you think about, what's the number the investors are looking at? Oh, it's acquisition. And now everybody is pumping all this money into acquisition, right? And Google and Facebook are winning, because all the customer acquisition costs are just skyrocketing. So I think in the end, it just became this crazy kind of race to customer numbers, but the underlying foundations haven't actually been as strong as they really should have been. And then I think now you're seeing the reaction is consolidation, right? So I worked for a digital banking platform called Penta, and that space is crowded. Providing digital bank accounts for small businesses, it's a very crowded space. And I actually think that if I look at the more established banking brands in Germany, I would have thought that a Deutsche Bank should have acquired a Penta, because this is something they're always trying to build within, right? Like, okay, we're going to build our little baby in-house, our little digital, but it's the same people. But Penta was then acquired by Konto. And if you actually look into it, Konto was struggling to grow in Germany. So they had a VP here, they were trying everything, but the space is so crowded. And so for Konto, it was much, much easier for them to acquire Penta. And for Penta, this was much, much easier than trying to find investors during this very difficult season to pump more money in for Series C. Because, now when the crisis hits, the investors are looking at more than just the number of your customers. They're looking at, like Shola said, profitability and are you sustainable? So I think the thing that really reminded me is that never always just be prepared for the season that you're in. Because the question can change tomorrow. The question for your life, your direction, what you're doing, it can honestly just change tomorrow. And it's really about being very, very conscious that it's good, obviously, to live in the present, but always think about different scenarios. Talk to other people. Try to understand, okay, if this was to happen. I think I've had 2 instances. I think in 2019, I was looking for a job. I was just working really, really hard, but I wasn't growing my network. I didn't have very deep roots or connections within the space that I was in. And so now when I was looking for a job, I didn't really have anyone who could refer me or recommend me. And I felt very, very lost, because when I moved to Berlin, I feel like I had 1 foot in the UK still, and then 1 foot in Berlin. So I didn't really make that effort. And I actually spoke with Kaveh because someone advised me to speak to her. So she helped me with my sort of CV and LinkedIn. And then I just thought to myself, actually, I was just prepared I always thought I'm just going to go back to London. But then actually that all changed. And then now I had to rethink. And I just remember saying to myself in 2019 that I was never going to find myself in a position where I'm looking for a role and people are not referring me actively or people are not seeking me. And so I worked really, really hard to really try to, and this is where we talk about sustainability, right, and substance, to really try to build that community, build that network, and also pour out my experiences to share with other people. And actually this year, I had saw a role at OLX, and obviously I'd met Shola before. I didn't get the role, but Shola was happy to refer me. And those are the type of things, when you go to these kind of more senior levels, people need to use their social currency. They need to use their social currency to say, hey, this person. And then this role that I have now, the recruiter said he'd already seen my profile, but so many people had told them, because you don't see these jobs online. This job never ever went on any job board. It all happens behind closed doors, and it's behind networks and on Slack and emails, and no one knows. But he had seen my profile, but other people had said to him, have you spoken to this person? She was the head of product at Penta. And then he said so many people had said it, and then that's how they ended up contacting me. So I think when we look at what's happening in the market, it's really thinking about, is what I'm doing sustainable, and does it actually have substance? And what if the season just changes? Like, what does that mean for me?
Wow, that was so deep. Please give them a hand. I know everything that you both said, especially around like investors are looking for profitability. Cheta, you've seen how many startups just working around vanity. That like went so deep. I was like, oh my gosh. And this really speaks to you as a professional. When you look around, if you go deep into the details, you will see where there is vanity and where there's real products and real good teams. They are there, but it takes a lot of work. You have to invest, a lot of time and resources. You gotta go to lunch with people.
Yes.
and just have conversations with people. And like you said, Chita, like the uncertainty can happen anytime, and you have to be prepared for it. The uncertainty happened for me at Smart Recruiters in June. Yeah, but because I'm in the talent space, I'm always ready. You know, in recruitment, we always know your time can come now, but I'm prepared because I'm in the space. But when you're not in that space and in that mindset, you can really get hit really hard, either emotionally and physically, and that affects really your life. So all the advice you've given on building networks, finding what you value, take that tonight, honestly. One of the things that I also wanted us to look at is the work of diversity and inclusion as part of a sustainable business model for many companies. And for a lot of number of years, we've seen that diversity actually focuses mostly at the bottom level. We don't have enough either gender diversity at the top, so C-suite, neither do we have racial diversity at the top. So what does this mean in this current economic system situation? Means that all the diversity that we worked towards is going out of the door with, you know, all the not so needed functions in the company. And so if you had kids only and you had one intern, the intern is gone, you're back to square one. And of course, recruitment teams are being cut out, marketing teams, diversity and inclusion, that just has to go in terms of budgets. But what does it say about companies and still the kind of ecosystem that we're building? Is it worthwhile?
I mean, I am a black woman, right? So I'm gonna say it's worthwhile. I think that we should always have good memories, right? So I think we should always remember whatever happens in the future, who sort of sustained all of these diversity, inclusion, and belonging programs. Because I think if you look at what's happening now, right, these are all knee-jerk reactions, right? People are just like, oh, just slash and burn wherever is the quickest and what will harm the business the least. So it's also thinking about, you know, companies making these very bold statements when the times are good, but actually when you want them to really hold on to it when the times are not so good, they're not really doing that, right? It's not very active. And I think that we need to move away from, and Agnes said this, we need to move away from expecting companies to do things, and then we need to take that responsibility as well ourselves. So within the workplace, of course, you know, there's a lot that now I'm in a position where I have much more influence than I've ever had. So it's very important to me that I represent all of these different topics. And actually, we're in the process right now of coming up with, we've got a senior leadership offsite next week. So thinking about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And I'm very conscious that when we have this session, we're starting from zero, right? So I know I also have to prepare myself mentally not to lose it and be patient because it is a process. But I know that the process starting is still a very, very, very important thing. I think these type of communities, that we are the fuel, right? We are the fuel that keeps these kind of communities going. And the more active that we are, the more that we show up, the more that we contribute, and the more that we actively can do, then companies will take notice, because I think we might move away from having these in-house teams rather than moving towards partnerships, because I think that's where companies will probably be going, rather than saying, okay, we want to have this big team in-house, but I think they will start forming stronger partnerships. And I think, you know, there's lots of different sort of groups, community groups, organizations, and I think that there's actually a lot of scope to do that. So in October, for example, I hosted an event. This was a partnership that Zalando had with Girls Talk London. This is led by two black women who are actually of Zimbabwean descent. But I think we're going to see this more and more as more on the partnership side, rather than the company having a team kind of in-house, because I think that if it's not a strategic goal for anyone in the organization, and I mean strategic from the board, right? If it's not on the board's strategy or it's not in their goals, it becomes very difficult. Just a quick story. There's a big supermarket chain in the UK called Sainsbury's. And there was an incident in Sainsbury's where there was some sort of a racial incident, and Sainsbury's jumped on this, right? And they were just like, oh, you know, if you're racist, we don't want you to shop here, you know, really sort of jumping on the wave. And then a young black woman replied their tweet and took a picture of their board and said, okay, so tell us about all the work that you're doing. And I think this is where a lot of companies are getting caught out, right? Is it doesn't help to have like a student working on diversity, inclusion, belonging, because what influence can that student have to make a meaningful change? And I think that is really about all of us being very supportive of people maybe who are close to board level. We need more people who look like us on boards, but how do we make that happen, right? So we need to be, there's a lot of power in numbers, and don't underestimate that. There's a lot of power in numbers, and I think not to look outside and ask other people to do it, but it also has to come from us.
Thank you for that. Shona, before you start, I was thinking, you could speak maybe to the point of how do we strategically work on promoting more diversity in leadership positions? So, and even ourselves, how do we start actually pursuing these roles in leadership positions so that we know, we're not going to be the first ones to go, but how do we start that path?
And I'll answer that in a second, but let's keep an eye on time because you do want to ask people to give questions
Yes,
too. So
yes.
we don't want to just be us talking, we might want to hear from you also. So let me state some, because I think I'm going to feel like I'm going to be coming from the corporate side a lot today. So let me state some of the corporate ground, right? Diversity and inclusion, no matter what's happening in the marketplace, will continue. Why? Because it's a European directive, right? And here's the interesting thing, because I'm in a lot of round circles and round table discussions. The interesting thing is that most companies would prefer to have a woman who's black, maybe of a different gender, right, or of a particular sex experience, because you tick all the boxes. And the reality is that the pipeline for male for leadership positions is empty, right? That's just the truth. Take the UK, for example. I'll start there because that's where I spend most of my time. There is no black CEO in the Fortune 500. No black male CEO. There's women, but no black male. Which is like, and the only guy who was EJ, he stepped down because he now works for Apple. So EJ is my friend. He stepped down from being the CEO of his company, which is on Fortune. But he's the only one, and he stepped down. So what's happening? So the point is, we're not going to have diversity at the top unless we're going to invest at the bottom. I'm not just talking about putting people through the funnel. I'm just talking about the fact that it's a long journey to get to the board level. It's a long journey. It's not like candy. They don't hand it out, right? You have to work hard. And one of the things I always say is that you have to work hard. Two, you have to love the company. You're not going to hit the board level if you don't love the company you work for. And so one question I can ask you to go away with is, like, to your point, do you love the company you work for? Do you feel that you want to represent the company you work for? Do you love the products that you're working on? Do you want to speak about it? Do you have stock in your own company? Like, because if you don't have any of those things, you're never going to climb. Because the higher you go, the lonelier it becomes, right? Now, what we are seeing around the world right now, if you really take the time, you will see that there's been a big shift. I can name most companies, Google, IBM. Who are the people at the top of those organizations? The people who, the Asians who've been working in the background, working hard, building skills, building understanding, building loving organizations. I think I was watching an event the other day, and it was an Asian CEO, an Asian chief technical officer, an Asian chief product officer, and Asian chief people officer. Now look at a company called Workday. You go to Workday, the CEO is a woman, the chief product officer is a woman, the chief technical officer is a woman, the chief people officer is a woman. That's intentional, right? It was an intentional thing. So all I can say is that if we want to see more representation in the higher echelons of industry, then we got to work hard with a long-term goal in mind. That's very hard because the reality is that when we start off in our careers, we're looking for money. And then money becomes the key factor that determines where you generally take your career. I have a lot of friends who have the same number of experience with me, but would never be in the boardroom because they just decided to contract. And contracting doesn't get you into the boardroom. So now I'm sitting down with them and say, okay, how do we recreate your career? How do we retell your story to get into the boardroom? And I'm saying this to say that for anybody in this room who wants to go into the boardroom, you need to commit 5 to 10 years of building the networks, building the culture, building the mindset, and understanding what it takes to be in those places. Because it's not how well you work, it's how you can tell the story of what you're doing, right? Because in the boardroom, it's not about who cares whether you can work Excel or not. Just tell me the story of how we're going to make money. Tell me the story of how you're going to grow talent. Tell me the story of how you're going to expand market. Tell me the story. So you become more of a storyteller than a doer. And so the way to know where you are in your career is to say, to ask yourself, are you doing or are you telling the story of what's been done? That's a good key.
That's deep. Oh my gosh.
Really deep.
Really good. Thank you so much.
To add to that, so I'm not on a board yet. But what I can say is you can go to, for instance, a shopping mall or a certain street, and for some reason in your mind you tell yourself, I can enter H&M, but I cannot enter, you know, I cannot enter I cannot enter I don't want to say Cadbury because I think you can still find a lot of normal brands in Cadbury, but you know what I mean? You might find this like super exclusive Louis Vuitton, like where they make like special parfums where you have to pay like 600 euros, and you tell yourself before entering the shop, I can't get in, I can't afford it. This shop is not for me. So the shop didn't stop you from entering it, you stopped yourself. So for me, I always bring it back to what's my responsibility. Am I looking for the cracks in the door? Because sometimes all you need is just a little crack, and then you push the door and you have a foot in, and then you observe, and then you learn, and then you challenge yourself, and then you ask the right questions, and then you see people like Shola and you're like, what book are you reading? Sometimes that's it. What book are you reading? And then you read that book, and the next conversation you sound different. You gain new language for a new room. You really need to dare, because I think it was Michelle Obama who said, I used to fear to enter certain rooms, and then I entered the room and I discovered the people that were in the room are actually the ones that didn't deserve to be there. So I really, really believe that a lot of the blockers that we face are up here. Like, I want us as Black people, as women, to stop using the word imposter syndrome. I want us to enter the room and take up the space and own it, but also not like with an arrogance, but with a healthy curiosity. Like, yes, we bring value, yes, we can continue to learn, but yes, we're here because we truly deserve to be here. And now, how can we help another person to also get into the room? Because someone had to see me and the value that I brought and help me, and I have a responsibility to help someone else. But here's the thing, nobody is going to help you if you do not bring the accountability. Like, people on these levels here, they don't have time to waste, right? So if we're going to get them to get us into certain spaces, we also have to bring the accountability. Because, like, don't waste my time and don't stain my reputation. Because if I'm gonna vouch for you, make it count. And then vouch for the right people as well and let them make it count, and it keeps, you know, it's like a snowball effect thing. And it's a joint responsibility, like I don't want to slaughter your name. I don't. Yeah, but exactly. So yeah, we can only do it together. So next time you pass by a very expensive store, I'm saying that in the career context, apply for that job, you know? And if you don't get it, you get the learning. Because I had a job that I applied for and I went through 16 interviews. 16 interviews. But then I met EVPs and I met, you know, and the language was different and the exposure that gave me is something nobody can take away from me. And I had to work while I was going through this interviewing process. And no, I did not have connections. I really just kind of like say, try, Agnes, try. And a lot of people were like, you could make it. At some point I had like interview fatigue, but I'm so proud of myself that I took a shot on myself. And that experience is something nobody can take away from you. And so if you're in it for the long run, for the 10 years, then you have to be willing to go in even when you don't know how it's going to turn out, but you learn. You never lose, you always learn, and you always get better.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, 16 interviews, wow.
Yeah.
10 is my maximum. So my current role I had 10 interviews. So you asked what book am I reading right now? I'm reading this book called Why Startups Fail. If you're interested in understanding startups and why startups fail, it's a really good book. But it also tells you why startups succeed. But I do think, to your point, that studying, reading is also a helpful way of kind of building your muscle, building your understanding. Because now if I go into a room, talking to a startup, I have all these questions in my head that haven't come from experience, but come from reading. And reading is one of the second fastest ways of learning. Experiencing is the first, and then reading is the next. And I've made up my mind 3 years ago to read at least 10 books a year. And so far I'm doing well. I think I'm at 11 right now. So the more you read, the more you learn, the more you learn, the more you grow. And we don't have time to go back and learn the hard way. So we need to learn and unlearn very quickly and be agile about our own development. And, you know, my story is not complete if I don't start from the beginning. I started as a security guard, even though I had a degree in civil engineering. When I got to the UK, there were no jobs, so I went into security, right? But you chart your own course, and that's kind of what Agnes is telling us. You chart your own course, and if you chart your own course, you would get to where you expect yourself to be. But I realized, actually, that a lot of us spend a lot of time with what I call job mentors, people who mentor you to do your job well. And then what happens is that you spend 5 years doing your job well, and you've lost that time in building your career. And what you really need to look for is people who are going to career coach you to where is your career going. And I wasted 10 years of my business life because all I was chasing was the next promotion and not a career, until I met a mentor who said, so where do you want to be in 10 years' time? And this is not an interview question, it was like, where do you, Shola, want to be in 10 years' time? When you look back 10 years from now, what do you want to say about your career? And maybe now start thinking in the context of how am I building my career? And once you start doing that, you use a different lens, because then I realized that I was a programmer when I started in my career. I realized that programming was going to India. So I was like, if I stay in programming, sooner or later, I'm going to be redundant. So I went into business analysis. Then I realized that was also going to India. I was like, oh, what's going to happen? Then I got into project management. Right? In fact, like, I kept kind of following the thing, and a lot of places I found myself in is because somebody just looked at me and said, you know, Agnes, you'll be a good HR technologist. I was like, really? You like people, you like technology. Boom, I applied, I got the job. And that's how I got in. So I'm just saying that sometimes you need good people around you who are going to push you in the right direction, but you got to think long term.
This is church right here for me. To be honest, because I've lived both being an employee and also being a founder of my own business. And even in the business side, I do get the same questions, you know. companies are interviewing me when they say they want to buy or they want to work with talent diverse. They want to have the conversations, you know. So the recruiter can reach out to me, but it's still the VP of talent that's going to decide. And I realized the moment I have to speak to the VP, I have to up my game. It's not the same, it's just a job board. No, it's the results that the job board or the work that I do in general going to do for the company. I was like, man, I thought I was done with interviews. But you know, even on the business side, I still need every single day to up my game, how I communicate, how I present myself, how our brand looks like, how I deliver. I think the first most challenging thing for me is how I deliver the first assignment, because that in itself, it's gonna go to the next assignment and the next company. If I fail there, I know already 5 other VPs already are going to know about my performance, and that's going to determine what happens next. And it's a bit of pressure, but it's just really like accountability on myself as well. Like, do I really want this? And how much am I willing to do for this business to succeed? And that's hard, but I'm committed. And now we'll open the floor for you to ask questions. We can have about 10 to 15 minutes with questions, then we can have pizza, then we can go to networking. So yeah, the floor is yours. And I'll pass the mic.
Do I have to press it?
No, it's
No? Yeah?
yeah.
Thank you all very much for your time today. My takeaway is stay ready so you don't have to get ready. So thank you very much. My questions are, if you don't mind, first of all, do you have any advice on effective networking? And or what's the number one question someone should ask if they want to get your time? And my name is Giselle Gill, and I'll be sending all of you a LinkedIn request.
Yes, I was just about to say that. Connect with everybody here on LinkedIn, and don't leave this room without connecting with one another. Answers.
Nice to meet you. I would say effective networking is when you've made these connections today. It's not about like, okay, I've connected on LinkedIn and that's it. You actually have to nurture the relationships with the people who you feel maybe you had some affinity to, or maybe people who are kind of in the same space as you. So I would say that it shouldn't just be like I've done it and then move on, but you actually have to be very active in doing that. So what was the other question?
What's the number one question someone should ask if they want to get your time?
Okay. So for me, I'm not sure about Agnes Shola. So I get, I feel like everyone wants to do product at the moment. I'm like, why? It's so stressful. I don't get it. But anyway, it seems to be a very sexy career choice. It's really hot right now. I think for me, it's just the people who always get me are the people where I read the message and it's just really authentic and it's polite. You know, people will tell me like, hi, I've seen your profile, or a friend told me about you, and then they tell me a bit about themselves and what they need, and sort of say to me, if it's possible, you know, please let me know if we can connect. And then I get people who are like, I literally had this the other day, I've attached my CV, I'm looking for a job, so review it and let me know what you think. That's not the way to approach, because, you know, then it's just not like it's just not a great opener. It's just like, it's not polite, it's not genuine. They're probably sending this to like 150 other people. So I think for me, what always really gets me to respond to people is when they tell me a bit about themselves and then actually what they're looking for. And I think Agnes and Charlotte touched on accountability. It's not about just you taking from me, right? So it needs to be an exchange. It's got to be an exchange. So I learn a huge amount from my mentees. I think for me, my mentees have actually helped me to be a better leader to people who are sort of, we call them Gen Zs, right? I would never, if I didn't have my mentees, I think I really would have struggled to be an effective manager for people who are quite a bit younger than me. So it really needs to be an exchange, but you have to also really know, like, what are your goals, right? Don't just connect with me because you think, oh yeah, she's a chief product officer, and maybe in 5 years I want a job, so I'm going to connect with her. But it really needs to be like, why are you connecting with me? Like, what's your goal? Like, what do you actually want to achieve? It could be friendship, it could be like career related, but I think you have to nurture these relationships.
I'll definitely echo that. I mean, I have 15,000 connections on LinkedIn, and I make it a point that in a year I will connect in that year to at least 80% of my network. So you build a network, but you've got to work your network, and then you've got to give to your network. So a lot of people, like you said, they just connect with you, but where's this going? Like, why are we connected? But if you kind of think about the fact that you can network up and you can network down. So I network with people who are younger than me because I see something in them that I value. I network with my peers, and I network with people who are kind of ahead of me. So you kind of, but you have to know in your mind, if you can't catalog your network in your mind, then it's not really a network. It's just a bunch of people who are connected to you. And that's why I don't generally like to connect with my friends on LinkedIn. So Facebook is for friendship, and LinkedIn is for business. So I handle my private friendships and maybe social networks in Facebook, but in LinkedIn then we're connected because we're going to do some kind of business together, whether it's me introducing you to somebody, you introducing me to somebody, or us connecting or building a relationship. So I would say when you build a network, you've got to work that network. And if you can't work it, make it smaller and then grow it again, right? So make it smaller, make it tangible, make it efficient, make it powerful, and then grow it, right? And the reality is that I always try to think that when was the last time I actually applied for a job? It's a long time ago. Like, it's a long, long time ago. I've always been headhunted, I've always been recommended, I've always been asked, I've always been called upon. I would say in the last 10 years, I've not ever applied for a job. Doesn't mean I don't apply for jobs, but I've never gotten a job because I applied for it. I've gotten most of the jobs because somebody said, hey, would you like to work with us? And that's how it starts. And actually, recently I was approached by a headhunter, and actually I was approached by the senior vice president of the company, and she's like, everybody's been talking about you. I'm like, who is everybody? And she's kind of giving me these names of people who've been talking about me. And that's kind of where you want your network, that's how you want your network to work for you. But for that to work, you need to be willing to give to your network. So every year I start out by saying, how am I going to give to my network? 15,000 people across the globe in different countries, how am I going to give to that network? And if you make that intentional, then that's what the network starts giving back to you.
Amazing answers.
Oh, I'm sorry, there's one more question. So what, I think on the second question, which is what should somebody write? I mean, just be curious, like kind of just show curiosity and tell me a story, right? A lot of people who just try and network with me and they say hi. I'm like, hello. Yeah. I mean, one of the most fascinating mentees I've had was a lady who heard me speak. Never met me before, she heard me speak in an event in Nigeria, and later contacted me on LinkedIn and said, I heard you speak before you spoke about you're in this profession. I would like you to mentor me. And it's been one of the most fascinating and amazing relationships I've ever had. She's now in Canada. But this was a lady who started out the conversation with huge intentionality, huge. And actually our relationship has been of that, to the extent that we have a mentoring circle called Rising, that are all people she brought into that circle. So we have a circle of people I mentor that all of them are connected to her, and actually mentor that group as a whole because of her. That's how intentional she was.
Amazing. Agnes, do you mind, let's take the other questions so you can directly answer those, yeah?
Yeah, I can speak up.
Yeah?
Yeah, my question was, I wanted to just follow up on how you get your network to work for you. I mean, for me, I'm already thinking like it would cause me to have a lot of screen time, have to sit behind my computer, try to type and like actively communicate with them and have discussions, or also do meetups and all? Like, is that what you mean? Is that what you did in that case? Like, I want to get to the nitty-gritty of actually what goes into the getting your networks to work for you. I don't know if my question is clear, but
Yeah,
It is clear.
yeah.
Agnes, you can take that.
She's got the mic.
So, a personal story. I'm very terrible at networking. And that very, very cautiously, because I am very picky and very cautious of my time and how I invest my time. So it's very hard to get my time because I'm arrogant about my time. I'm either learning or I'm sporting or I'm also looking for people from whom I can learn. I don't do small talk very well because I have such a thirst to learn and to grow myself. And also because I'm very self-reflected around how much time I may have wasted, because at a certain age in my life, I just was all over the place and just doing everything and nothing. And then at some point your brain snaps and you're like, whoa, that was a lot of time. Now the great equalizer for all of us, Shola, people who have really hit where we're trying to get to, is the 24 hours. We all have 24 hours. What makes the difference is what are you doing with those 24 hours, right? So for me, it's like, you want to hang out after work? Why? What's the value? Like, I'm always like, what's the value at? If I go to an event, people are like, you're not taking a glass of wine. I'm like, what's the value at? And I've also become so clear about that I don't mind saying it out loud. So when I say I'm bad at networking, I mean vague networking. Like just being in places for the sake of being in places. I will sit and I will quietly watch. If you're Christian, you know, out of the fullness of a man, the mouth speaks. If you're really paying attention and you're really listening to people, you will hear where the true value is. So first and foremost, that's a guide. Like, listen to people when they speak. Like, really, really listen. And you will find your people by simply listening, because something about what they say will deeply resonate with you. And then recognize that there's a time when you will be ready, and there's a time when you won't be ready. Like, you think you have to network right now, but you could really destroy a lot of relationships by being out of timing. Like, timing is also something. You need to get yourself ready sometimes to get the time of certain people. Because it would be so sad to say, okay, Shola, I take an hour of your time, but I didn't prepare for that 1 hour. And then the hour goes by and I get absolutely nothing because I'm not clear on where I want to go, what am I trying to get out of this, and so on and so forth. So there's, again, a lot of personal responsibility around why are you networking? What's the goal? And why this person? What are you trying to get out of them? Like, and what are you going to do with it? Because at some point, some people are chasing purpose. They are putting in something in you for you to also really do something big with it. Like, there's no randomness about it. So for me, it's like, it's not so much about the formula or how should I write. When you're ready, you will know how to write. And if that is your person, when you write and they read what you've written, because it's coming from a very deep and true and ready place, it will resonate. And I think when you're paying attention to your own growth and to the people you think you can learn from, I think that something heavenly works in your favor, because I think the God who sees you and in your private space, who sees the preparation that you put in, he could be charging 25,000 for an hour, you know, for organizations, and for some crazy reason he just decides to like give you even 2 hours of his time at absolutely no cost. You know what I mean? There are those divine moments as well, because you did the work, because the authenticity shines through. So That's what I would say. Like, go back into yourself, like really figure yourself out, prepare yourself, and the rest kind of aligns somehow.
I'll let you jump on that, but just to kind of give you a little bit more context to that, I think your personality does come into play. And actually, I don't know whether you listened to everything she just said. She said, I'm going to summarize what she said in total. She said, be intentional. So that's all she said. Like, if you want to give somebody your time, be intentional about why you're giving them your time. And how you work your network cannot be any different than how you are. So I'm a person that likes a lot of people, likes a lot of company. I can hold multiple conversations at the same time. Some people are not like that. So build your network around you, but be intentional about it. That's all I can say. So whatever intentional looks like you, like if you deliberately don't want to spend time on the screen, then call somebody, right? We don't call enough. Like, call somebody. Like, some of the best conversations I've had, it's not been in LinkedIn chat, it's been on the phone. Right? Can I call you? And then we have a proper chat. So build your network, work your network according to who you are. So, but simple examples are, if somebody writes something good, like it, right? If somebody writes something or does something, the story I told you about, you want to be a task, doing the task or telling the story? Because I spoke to a guy who was on LinkedIn who changed jobs, and I was like, dude, how did you do that? How did you go from being the CEO of your own company to be working for another company? How did you do that? And then he told me the story of, do you want to be the guy doing the work, or do you want to be the guy who's telling the story? And since then, I mean, he should patent it, but I keep using it because it was one of the most powerful conversations. I intentionally said to him, can I call you? And I called him. We had this chat. And he's an amazingly experienced guy, and probably 2 or 3 years older than me, but the one he told me was so enriching. So that's what I mean when I say work your network.
I love that. I'll just add one other example. Like, for example, I do have a lot of people who follow me on LinkedIn, and they don't normally come to the events that are organized, but they share them. Or they're always like, when somebody's looking for something or someone, they just say, oh, look at Kaveh. I've never met them. I've never ever had a conversation with them, but simply because they see what I'm doing, it aligns with them, they want to keep me in the network, so they keep that virtual relationship that we don't have, because at some point I'll be like, hey, let's chat, like, I love this, why are you recommending me? So small things like that too I have. You have a question?
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I hope you all can hear me.
Yes.
What's happening in the world in terms of like the job market and everything. So Shola, you were like, some people can be good at their job, like be focused on being good at your job, like forget the career. And in this market right now, that's technically everyone's focus. Like, there's no need sugarcoats in it. Like, that's what everyone is being advised to focus on in this current market. Just be good at your job. So write this way, but be good at what you do. But like, how do you make how do you balance out, especially like with the long term, being good at your job, but balance out thinking, hey, can we do this in 5 years, 10 years, and especially now being, I'll say, Black or African in Europe, you start thinking about all those things as well, like while you're being good at your job, and how can you still balance that with like growth opportunities in the field?
I think that your job should occupy a certain amount of time, but your career, that's actually about your life, right? About how, and I think we talked a lot about not sort of resting on, okay, I'm working at this company and I'm doing a really, really good job. It's got to be about, you have to create the time, you have to be, I think we've said this word many times, intentional. You have to be very, very intentional about, okay, what are my next steps and what do those look like? And I think that as human beings, we're very obsessed with all of these like big things. Everything has to be this massive shift. But there can be many things that you do that are small steps that will get you to where you want to get to, right? So I think there are lots of things like, do you mentor someone? Do you have a mentor yourself? How can you share knowledge? I think even when I look at my LinkedIn feed, a lot of people from my community don't post much. And this is something that I ask a lot, like, oh, why don't you post? And people's response is usually, no one wants to hear what I have to say. And I'm like, okay, so I think that everyone wants to hear what all the other people say, but it's not about sitting back and waiting for someone to say, oh, actually, you know what, Ansela, now you can start posting on LinkedIn. This has to come from yourself. This has to come from your own initiative. And I can tell you that just being good at your job is just not enough. But I'm not saying kill yourself with like 1,000 extracurricular activities, but pick the ones that are actually going to add value, that are actually going to be some of those small steps. So I can tell you honestly from my career trajectory, I would not be the chief product officer if I'd carried on the way I was carrying on if I look back at like 2017. Because then I wasn't really connected to many people, I wasn't pouring into my own sort of area of expertise, as in, you know, playing back what I think about product management and all this kind of stuff. But now when I started to build my network, speak at different events, speak on panels, it's only through all of these different connections that I've had different opportunities that my name has now come up in places that I've never been to, people who I've never met, but I was just being recommended. But it had to take me, it wasn't enough that I just sat there saying, oh, I'm really good at product management. This was just not ever going to be enough. So there were a lot of small steps that I made. And I think what happens is you make many, many small steps, and then you think you want to make a big one, but you end up making a step. You could never have told me in January when I had COVID and I was isolating at home with my mom, my sister, my 4-year-old nephew who was going completely nuts, being locked in the house. You could never have told me at that time that come August, you're going to be a chief product officer. You could never have told me that. But I made so many small steps and then some big ones, and then a huge one just came. It's like everything then added up, and then I was ready. And I think there's also an element of readiness. You have to also be ready for those things, and you have to kind of do stuff to work those different muscles. So, you know, how do you talk to different people? How do you pitch your message? When you're getting feedback at work, is it just like surface level feedback, or is it like deep feedback where people are like, you know what, if you want to get to the next level, this is what it actually looks like. So it's really having to find out that very valuable information. Because often what I see at work is that the difference between someone who's doing a brilliant job and someone who's doing a good job is actually not that much. But you need someone who's invested, who will tell you, you know what, these are the 2 things that you could do to get to the next level. But this is all about being intentional and relationships.
Deep. I think it really also depends where you are on the journey, because it's a really long journey. I think it's important to be good at your job. So for me, the first time that I was headhunted, it was because I had been so good at the job that I had been doing at the time that my reputation was going ahead of me. So people were having conversations around how I deliver, how reliable I am, my expertise, without me being in the room. And I think that's depending on where you are in your journey, because that was like really at the beginning of my career, and I wasn't, honestly speaking, I was just thinking I just need to pay my bills, you know? But then I came to work and I was like, just be excellent, work for the next promotion, work for the next promotion. But there were people around me who were seeing me and seeing more potential in me than I was seeing in myself at the time. And they went and had conversations about me with other people who had conversations, you know, and then one day you're there and your phone rings and the person is like, is this Agnes? And you're like, yeah, how can I help you? Who are you? And, you know, and before you know it, someone is offering you something that you couldn't, like with conditions where you're like, what, do they even know like what I'm doing? Like, you know what I mean? So be excellent, I would say, like build that personal brand of being excellent, and somehow every seed that you're sowing is growing and will come back to find you somehow. And I think those are the little steps that she mentioned earlier. I have to ask you after the talk.
I'm gonna have to say that we need to close now.
Okay, but can I just say something?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, I think you could. The reason I want to say this is because I was thinking of an illustration, and 2 comes to mind. And the illustration is this: right now we're all breathing. You're not trying to breathe. You're breathing. But if I throw you into water, you'll be conscious that you have to breathe. And so I would say be good at your job. We all have to be good at breathing, but stress test your breathing, right? So if you're, they say that there's a bit of stress that is required for you to get better, and there's a bit of stress that makes you overstressed, right? So you need to be on that threshold where you are stretching yourself, and being good at your job becomes just like breathing, and your career is more like, if I throw myself into this new opportunity, will I be able to breathe? And a book I read last year that really changed my perspective on this is a book called Winning. And this guy was talking about Michael Jordan. He's the coach of Michael Jordan. He said, Michael Jordan doesn't need to think about making a hoop. He can make a hoop with his eyes closed. What he has to think about is being attacked, being tackled, but still knowing I can make that hoop, right? And I think that's what you need to get good at. So you're good at your job, but you have enough time and capacity to think about your future. Whether it's 100% of you can't do your job 100%. It's got to be 90%, 95%. And that 5% is where you begin to build your future dots to kind of get you to where you need to get to. Money is important, but I tell you, having mentors and coaches around you will help you see beyond monetary value and actually build value. Right? Because if you build value, money will follow. That's a fact. So build value and money will follow. So.
I deeply need to say something. Take care of yourself.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are susceptible to people pleasing, they're susceptible to the pressure, and then before you know it, they burn out. I think burnout has become a thing now. Please take care of yourselves. Like, it sounds so trivial to say drink the water, go for the jog, eat the vegetables, really. Sleep, mind your business, focus, really take good care of yourself. Really. Like, that alone is gold. Because even if you get elevated but don't have the health to carry it, so.
Let's have Cheetah also drop her last
Yeah,
round,
drop your.
because I just have to like take it all in.
Oh, my last job about?
Yeah. Anything.
About tonight.
Oh, don't take events like this for granted. Don't just come to just be here, but come to really take something away. This is your tribe, these are your people. Like I told you, I was looking for a role, I could message Shola. That is a game changer, to have access to someone like Shola in a company, right? I didn't get the job, but it's, that's still fine. But the fact that I could approach him and ask, and we met through one of these events. So, don't take for granted the mobility that you can actually have within your own circles. It doesn't always have to be from outside, but within your own community. Don't take it for granted, the connections that you make through this. Honestly, don't take it for granted. It can change your life.
Amazing. I mean, this is the most inspiring conversation I've had to close the year with. I've learned so much in 1 hour that I could have learned in the last 3 months, and just us in this room, imagine if all of us thought this way about our careers, about the current economic situations. I mean, we will change the world. And even if we don't change the world, we change each other's lives in this moment, And we're all connected to the other person whose life we can change because of this knowledge. So honestly, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Can I just say one thing? One thing is, I think Kabe deserves a huge hand of applause. Because building communities is not easy. There's a lot there's a lot that goes on now that we've been collaborating. There's a lot that goes on in the background, and for her to be able to do this in Berlin over the years is definitely something I think is absolutely amazing. With family life, with everything, with having had a baby so recently, but you still carry on. And these are the people that we should be celebrating and elevating and talking about when there are different opportunities. And the more that we pour into this, the more that, we talk about boards, right? Oh, we want to be on boards. Yeah, let's also pour into it. Kaveh builds her business and then she'll have a board and some of us will be on that board. So I just wanted to say to Kaveh, thank you so much for everything that you do.
I'm inspired. We have time to have pizza and drinks, and then we have about until 9:30, right, Eva? Yeah, but I think it still is a lot of time that we can spend together. So thank you so much. We wish you a very wonderful holiday season with your family and friends, and we will return again with Black in Tech in February. And yeah, just follow us, you'll get to know what we're up to next. I would love to see you next year. Enjoy. Oh no, I forgot one very important thing. Actually, Shola is underplaying his knowledge. She just wrote a book. Yes! Published a book, Managing Up.
Yeah, Managing Up for Career Progression.
Managing Up for Career Progression. And where can people find it?
You give them the link.
I will give you the link. I'll send it. I'll just send you the meetup messaging app, and it's very affordable.
Yeah, €5.
€5,
Wow.
but it's amazing. I mean, all these gems are in there, so support the initiative. Okay.
Yeah, so